Up next in the broadcast, at the World Cup, Korea's first match ends in a pivotal 1-1 tie with Russia, while here at home, hundreds of thousands of fans watched and celebrated in public. President Park will focus on her Eurasia tour and will deal with her embattled pick for prime minister after she comes back. This as lawmakers from both sides have challenged the nomination. Over the past 2 decades, a key figure measuring income inequality rises at a fast clip in Korea, and experts say this has the potential to keep us trapped in a low economic growth cycle. Primetime News begins now.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News in Seoul. I'm Kang Chae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us tonight. With President Park continuing her Eurasia tour now in Kazakhstan, her top priority seems to be on her diplomatic tour to boost ties in that region. But controversy continues in domestic politics, especially in regards to her prime minister nominee.
However, the top office says she will wait until after she comes back from her overseas trip to decide whether to push forward with her pick. Ji Myung-gil has this report.
President Park Geunhye is mulling over whether to submit a motion to the National Assembly asking for a confirmation hearing on Prime Minister-designate Moon Chang-gu.
The president is receiving updates on domestic affairs from top aides during her trip. The motions requesting the confirmation of nominated cabinet members will be reconsidered after she returns to Korea.
The presidential office had earlier said it would ask the parliament to prepare for a hearing this week. The postponement comes as both rival parties have been stepping up pressure on Moon to step down. He's been under fire for making controversial remarks years ago about Japan's colonization of Korea. At Wednesday's interpellation session, lawmakers grilled members of President Park's cabinet, where it became apparent that the prospects of Moon winning parliamentary confirmation are dim. Won Hae-young, lawmaker for the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, lashed out at the presidential office for Moon's nomination.
There seems to be a problem with the presidential office. It's not making the right choices for prime minister. What's going on?
I regret the fact that such controversies continue to rise. I cannot comment on the presidential office's verification system for candidates.
President Park's first choice for Prime Minister An Dae-hee withdrew his nomination amid criticism that he had made too much money as a lawyer, benefiting from his status as a former Supreme Court justice. The National Assembly will resume the interpellation session on Thursday with a focus on the economy. While details on the agenda have not been released, it's believed lawmakers will focus on bolstering safety management systems in response to April's ferry disaster. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
South Korean Unification Minister Yoo Gil-jae hinted that 4-year-long economic sanctions called the May 24 measures placed against North Korea might be lifted if Pyongyang chooses to show good faith in improving inter-Korean relations. During an interpellation session at the National Assembly on Wednesday, Minister Yoo said if the mood on the Korean peninsula changes and Pyongyang shows steps towards building trust, lifting those sanctions could be a possibility. The sanctions put almost all inter-Korean economic deals on hold except for the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex. If all goes according to plan, the U.S. will have a new ambassador to South Korea by the end of this year. The U.S. Senate held a confirmation hearing on Tuesday for Mark Lippert, who indicated there wouldn't be much of a shift in policy under his watch. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
At a Senate confirmation hearing Tuesday, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea nominee Mark Lippert said the alliance between Washington and Seoul have never been stronger. He said if confirmed, he will work closely with South Korea to denuclearize North Korea, as it remains a grave threat to the United States and its allies. Lippert said he will continue to isolate the regime and increase pressure through sanctions.
Continued to build the international consensus to isolate North Korea and its regime, and perhaps one of the best examples is to isolate them on the human rights issue.
Recognizing that the current diplomatic row between South Korea and Japan is a touchy subject, Lippert said he would not act as a mediator, but would encourage dialogue between the two neighbors.
We wouldn't play a mediation role. We obviously have conversations to encourage a better dialogue between the Japanese and South Koreans to work through some of these very difficult and painful historical issues.
Lippert said he will try to boost cooperation among Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington by arranging trilateral meetings, like the summit held in The Hague earlier this year. Lippert, who served as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, is arguably one of President Barack Obama's closest aides. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, he will replace current Ambassador Sang Kim in the second half of the year. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
There's no question that Korean electric vehicle battery makers have established themselves as major players in recent years, and now they're set to overtake Japan in market share. Connie Kim tells us how thinking big and targeting China's rising market for EVs is pivotal to this strategy.
China plans to have 5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020 as part of plans to address its chronic air pollution problem. It's a market Korea's EV battery makers are moving quickly to enter. Korea's #1 EV battery maker, LG Chem, inked a deal this week to supply to China's largest automaker, Shanghai Automotive Industry, and Chorus Automotive.
Shanghai automotive industry, unlike other local brands, caters to the high-end market. It has huge influence over the Chinese market. So we are expecting greater sales thanks to our recent contract.
From 2009 to 2011, during the infancy stages of the electric auto industry, Japan led the market, but Korea is making up ground. Last year, Korean companies took up more than 40% of the EV battery market share, and this is the year Korea is expected to leapfrog Japan. Other Korean players are also expanding their presence in China as well. Samsung SDI plans to invest $600 million over the next 5 years to build an electric car battery factory in China. And SK Innovation has entered into a joint venture with Beijing Desk Technology with the goal of becoming China's top EV battery manufacturer. Korean companies face the challenge of developing new, safe materials that can be used in next-generation products.
Secondary cell batteries, such as lithium-ion batteries, are regarded as dangerous because they contain liquid. Many companies from Europe and Japan are in the process of solidifying these batteries, but no Korean companies are trying it yet.
Extending the lives of batteries is another task for Korean companies who hope to cement themselves in China's green car market, which is expected to grow 20-fold by the year 2020. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The nation's bourse operator is set to implement measures aimed at promoting more local firms to go public. The Financial Services Commission and the Korea Exchange announced the plan in April to ease rules on filing and disclosing corporate financial information in order to boost the country's declining IPO market, bogged down by the sluggish economy and strict regulations. Starting from June 30th, a company with high-end technology and growth potential can be listed on the KOSDAQ with just 1 billion won in capital, while the trade restriction period for the largest shareholder of a firm that debuts on the secondary market will be trimmed from 12 to 6 months. It looks like more Korean women are turning in their aprons for timesheets. Data by Statistics Korea shows that the number of full-time stay-at-home moms came in at around 7 million last month, which is down 2.6% compared to the previous year. This marks the 11th straight month of decline. Some experts say it's the byproduct of government measures that encourage companies to institute flexible working hours as well as hourly jobs so that families can maintain a better balance between home and work. But a recent jump in part-timers and their reason for entering the job market being an immediate need for cash showed that these women needed to work to help support their families. One of the leading economic narratives of our times is income disparity, and our Hwang Jie is here with us to talk more about this issue. So, Jie, how bad has income disparity become in Korea?
Well, Korea's income inequality is in fact growing at one of the fastest rates in the world. And for details, it does get a bit technical. But if you take a look, Korea's Gini coefficient, a measure used to gauge the income gap, focusing on Korea's urban areas, you see the gain in this index from 1990 to last year. A reading of 0 means complete income equality. So a higher number near 1 indicates a widening gap in earnings between the haves and have-nots. And what's more worrisome is the pace of growth in income disparity. An ADB report shows that Korea's Gini coefficient grew at the 5th fastest rate among 28 Asian countries over a 20-year period beginning in 1990.
So looking at that graph, we saw that it spiked during the Asian financial crisis. But what explains the growth and the steady growth and the uptick these days?
Well, it's after the Asian financial crisis that sharply spiked. And to answer your question, it's the shrinking middle class, basically. Massive layoffs during the crisis pushed many of the nation's middle class out of the group.
Before the crisis, most ordinary people thought they had a job for life, and companies were reluctant to fire people. But after the crisis, a large number of mass layoffs took place, which resulted in widening income gaps.
So why is this a problem? Or maybe that was a stupid question, but why do we need to fix it at this point?
Well, Korea needs to break away from this low growth trap, slowing growth. And to do that, boosting domestic demand is considered the key to do so. And more important is that the active private consumption comes from a large and healthy middle income group. No matter how much more money the higher income group or the wealthy earns, it does not necessarily lead to more consumption. And experts say it simply means capital accumulation.
The recent dip in private consumption has made companies skittish about investing more. That results in more money just being piled up. This vicious cycle is the cause of the slowing growth trend for the Korean economy.
So basically, Koreans are not shopping, spending money, and businesses are not investing either.
Yes. The current assets, as you said, of listed manufacturers under the nation's 10 major conglomerates exceeded $245 billion as of the end of last year, according to the Financial Supervisory Service. That is a jump of close to 10% on year. A current asset is any asset that a company can convert into cash within 1 year.
All right. So, well, despite all of the programs to boost some of the balance sheets of the corporations, we can't force them to spend money. But what can the government do itself to help address this issue?
Well, what experts all agree on is creating quality jobs for the people. And what is more important for closing the income gap, experts say, is reforming the employment structure, which includes measures like raising the minimum wage level and bolstering the work share program, actually. But they do add that those measures would require public consensus.
All right, Geunhye, thank you so much for that report tonight.
Thank you for having me.
The U.S. has captured the key suspect who led an attack on its consulate in the Libyan city of Benghazi that killed 4 Americans 2 years ago.
For more on that story, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, the Pentagon says this was a major operation carried out by U.S. Special Forces and the FBI inside Libya.
That's right. Abed Abu Khattala was taken into custody in a secret military raid on Sunday and is now being held on a U.S. warship. He's being called the suspected ringleader to that deadly strike in 2012 on the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi. The attack killed 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens. President Barack Obama said Khattala is being transported to the U.S., where he will face the full weight of American justice.
But more importantly, it's important for us to send a message to the world that when Americans are attacked, no matter how long it takes, we will find those responsible and we will bring them to justice.
Khattala is expected to be charged and prosecuted through the U.S. court system and will not be sent to the infamous Guantanamo Bay facility. And moving on to the deepening crisis in Ukraine, President Petro Poroshenko has offered a unilateral ceasefire to pro-Russian militants who are battling for control of eastern Ukraine. Speaking to reporters in Kiev, Poroshenko said the peace plan would soon be implemented in order to allow Russian mercenaries to leave the country. Other government sources say it could take hours or even days for the temporary truce to take effect. The announcement comes after telephone talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Ukrainian security forces and pro-Russian separatists are continuing to clash in the eastern city of Slavyansk. The conflict has fueled a grave humanitarian crisis in the region since militants took control of government buildings in April. Many innocent civilians have been caught in the crossfire, with thousands fleeing to Russia or western Ukraine. Local officials say food, water, and electricity are in short supply for residents. A water pumping station in Slavyansk was recently damaged in fighting, which threatens the water supply for around 4 million people across the Donetsk region. And former journalist and Princess Letizia Ortiz will become Spain's new queen on Thursday when her husband, Prince Felipe of Spain, is sworn in as king. The face of Spain's queen-in-waiting is well known to Spaniards who for years saw her every day on television as a reporter and news presenter. Born on September 15, 1972, Ortiz is set to become the country's first Spanish-born queen in over a century. Meanwhile, on the streets of Madrid, locals spoke fondly of the princess.
She comes from a lower middle-class family with working parents and grandparents. She and her sisters have had to fend with divorced parents. She had to look for alternative jobs while she was studying, so in that sense, she has a profile that has a lot in common with any European citizen at the moment.
Ortiz first met Prince Felipe while she was covering the Prestige oil tanker disaster along Spain's northwestern coast back in 2002. And turning now to China, a new government report says that over 202 million of its citizens are aged 60 years or older last year, which accounted for about 15% of the country's entire population. At this rate, the proportion of elderly citizens nationwide will overtake that of Japan by 2030, making China the world's most aged society. The Ministry of Civil Affairs attributed the sharp rise to longer life expectancies, along with a growing tendency to live in larger cities that have better health services. This as Beijing faces a lack of resources to deal with the shift in its elderly population. The report also said there was about 42,000 nursing homes across the country, with a total of 4.9 million beds, which works out to an average of 24 beds for every 1,000 seniors. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Now, day 6, a big day at the World Cup, had Group H finally taking the field for their first official matches, of course culminating in the pivotal game between South Korea and Russia. Now, despite kickoff after sundown, it was a hot and humid start to the match. Now, in the first half, Korea's attack, led by Gu Ja-chul, showed promise but lacked the finishing touch, and the Russians had the edge in aggressiveness. And with the second half underway, it was tipping to the Koreans early on, and a timely substitution, bringing in Geunhye, proved to be the spark as his hard-hit strike found its way past the keeper and into the net. But minutes later, Russian sub Alexander Kershakov capitalized on a sloppy clearance to level up the score, and the match ended like that in a 1-1 draw. Now let's take a look at the other matches of the day, starting with the Group H meeting between Belgium and Algeria. Now, Algeria took an early lead as Sofiane Feghouli converted a penalty kick, but Marouane Fellaini's superb header tied it up, and Dries Mertens' finish on a counter-attack gave Belgium the 2-1 win and the lead on the Group H standings. Meanwhile, it came back around to Group A with Brazil taking on Mexico, and Brazil's attack behind Neymar came at full force, but Mexican keeper Guillermo Ochoa's brilliant saves kept it level, with the game ending in a 0-0 draw. And here in Korea, tens of thousands of fans took to the streets early in the morning to cheer for the Taeguk Warriors as they took on Russia. Our reporter Kwon So-ah, who was among the sea of red, reports.
대한민국! 대한민국!
10,000 supporters converged on the streets of Gangnam in southern Seoul to watch Team Korea's first match in the 2014 World Cup against Russia. Yeongdong-daedo Street was one of 26 main cheering locations across the nation. Roads were blocked off the previous evening as people began to stream in the pitch dark. They did not have to wait in silence. Famous Korean singers took the stage in the hours leading up to the beginning of the game. The main event was Korean pop star Psy's performance of his hit songs Gangnam Style, Gentleman, and Champion. The cheers and excitement built up to a fever pitch when the whistle blew for the start of the game, and of course when Lee Geunhye scored his goal in the second half.
The atmosphere in Korea is very, very great. We feel it's very, very friendly, and we really, really like it. So, Korea fighting! Korea fighting!
I think that Korea is going to win against Russia. I deserve so.
However, groans echoed throughout the crowd when Russia scored their equalizer. Disappointment over having let the 1-0 lead slip away, but also relief that the team didn't lose their first game and still has a great chance of qualifying for the knockout stage.
I anticipated we will win. I'm disappointed about the draw, but I think we will fare better in the next game.
Koreans have shown once again how they unite behind their nation's football warriors, even if it means getting up at the crack of dawn. Street cheering will start even earlier in the next game against Algeria, which kicks off next Monday, 4 a.m. Korea time. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And that time difference didn't affect the Koreans in Brazil, who showed up to cheer for their side at the stadium as well as other viewing locations across the Latin American country. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Decked out in red, these Korean nationals gathered at a hotel in Foz do Iguaçu, Brazil, where the Korean national soccer team is staying. Some 100 Koreans living in and around the South American country did not hesitate to make the long trip to show their support. During Korea's first match against Russia, emotional shouts of joy, anger, and disappointment resonated throughout the hall. The game finished in a 1-1 draw, a result the fans seemed happy about.
They have done their best. I am very thankful for them for giving us joy. They really played well. Go Team Korea!
I almost cried when Hong Jong-ho was replaced due to injury, but I was overjoyed when we scored the first goal.
Even the Brazilian staff at the hotel was pulled into the passion of the Korean fans.
They played really well like pros. I think Korean team will stay in Brazil for a while.
It's a sentiment shared by Team Korea supporters in Brazil, and more people are expected for the team's second match against Algeria next week. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Well, thank you for that report. I'll definitely be tuning into the Algeria match next week. But anyway, that does it for Primetime Sports. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
Well, luckily we didn't get any rain this morning, but skies quickly gave way to showers in some places in the country.
For more, Kim Bo-kyung joins us from the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, what's the latest?
Well, areas in the central regions are getting rain accompanied by stormy conditions and thunder. This is a result of the nation being at the edge of a high pressure front from the West Sea. However, hot summer conditions are expected in most regions tomorrow, so enjoy the sunshine while you can, because another bout of precipitation is forecast this weekend. Well, next Monday, Team Korea faces Algeria at Brazil's southern city of Porto Alegre. Weather there for tomorrow looks to be moderate with daytime highs reaching 13 degrees. Back here in the nation, rain clouds may stick around through tomorrow in Gangwon-do province, and a heads up as fine dust in the air should soar to higher than normal levels. On to Thursday's readings. Seoul and Busan hit 27 while Daegu and Gwangju soared to 31. Taking a look at other regions, Jeju reaches 25 while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 20 and 18. That does it for this hour, but I'll be back with more after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.
And I'll be back here at midnight for Late Night Edition. See you then.